This is our version of our customer roundtable following up to our Oracle Cloud Day online. Hopefully everyone had an awesome time joining us for the keynotes and customer interviews that we got a chance to facilitate and be a part of with you online. And what we wanted to do is bring to you a series of conversations that, had we all been together, would have occurred in person. And we're starting it with this concept of engagement and connectedness. I think it's been, for all of us, a crazy time. And crazy can be all kinds of things, whether it's children at home, whether it's managing all kinds of different virtual teams, and just keeping connected and engaged with our families as well as the people that we work with. And so what we decided to do today is bring together a couple of guests to talk about this concept and this topic of engagement. And what I'm going to do is welcome a few people here and let them just introduce themselves so that you get to know them if you haven't met them already. And then we'll start off the discussion on engagement and what it looks like both before everyone was self-quarantined or working from home from a mandatory perspective, or it's some sort of combination or hybrid as we continue to evolve in this situation. So with me today, I have Dave from DropTank. I have Chris, who is on the phone from our own Oracle small medium business sales team for North America Cloud. And I also have Katie with us from Naveego. And so what I would love to do is just have you get to know each of them and their roles, and then we'll go from there. So Dave, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction and background on yourself and where you are located today?
Sure. So I'm David Van Wiggeren. I'm CEO of DropTank. We specialize in customer engagement solutions, primarily in the fuel industry. And I'm located just outside of Chicago. I'm actually in my office. So I'm a cheater, big cheater. I'm in my office that's located about 4 miles from my house. But I'm the only one here. I'm sheltering in place in my office. Yeah, I have 5 kids, no nanny, and learning how to homeschool. That's my life right now.
So, Katie, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you are today? And for those of us who didn't get a chance to see your customer interview, what your role is at Naveego.
I'm Katie Horvath. I am president and CEO of Naveego. I am hailing from Michigan today, from Traverse City, Michigan, up north on Lake Michigan. And Naveego, we are a cloud-native golden record as a service software platform.
Cool. And then our last but not least, Chris, how about yourself? Give us a sense of where you are today and your role here at Oracle.
Thanks, Anastasia. It's great to see you guys. I wish we were doing this in person, but we're adapting, right? And so I'm in the Santa Monica area. I live in the Pacific Palisades down in Southern California. You can see I've got my COVID beard, and as long as I'm trapped in my home, I guess I can grow a beard. That's kind of new and fun. But as Anastasia said, I run and manage our SMB and high growth segment of the market for our cloud business in North America.
So just a bit of a background. I'm in San Diego, California. I have my son currently doing a Zoom class right now in English and Learning Arts. With that said, this concept of engagement and connectedness, that's not a new topic. It's something that we talk about collectively, regardless of whether we're working from home or sheltering in place or working in our offices. And for each of you in your roles, driving engagement and connectedness of your teams and your companies is really critical. And through discussions, some of the things that you've shared in terms of connectedness and engagement, I think collectively we would believe that other customers would benefit from that same sharing, whether they're the tools or techniques or ways that you stay connected. And I would love, perhaps we can just go around the table, if you will, have us share a bit how we're connecting today and how it might be different than the way that you were connecting when you were exclusively working from the office, or at least had the flexibility to make those choices. And so Dave, why don't we start with you? How did you stay connected before you were sheltering in place? And what are some of the things that have changed?
I'm a little bit of a people person. I like management by walking around, hearing what people are up to, whether it's at work or in their personal life. We used to put on a number of theme lunches, where we'd get everybody to kind of go through the line, taco bars or, all kinds of crazy different types of lunches. It was a great way to get people engaging with each other, building trust and camaraderie. Obviously that stuff is not happening right now. There is none of that happening. And, I used to realize, I used to experience that there were some of my team members who needed a little bit more one-on-one time than others. And now it's really pronounced, if I went a few weeks without connecting with some team members, I could tell maybe some anxiety would grow. And now I feel like we really need to connect more often. So, for me and at DropTank, we're all working from home, except for occasionally yours truly here working from the office by myself. But it's a lot of Zoom. We use Zoom, a lot of video, as I'm sure many of the people watching this, I'm sure have really started to ramp up the amount of video conferencing that you're doing. But some of the stuff that we have done to try to connect, we've always had an all hands meeting every week. Everybody in the company gets together. It's just 30 minutes. We let everybody know what's going on. We have just a few speakers talking about what's key and what's being delivered right now. And then I usually summarize at the end. And, we've gone to that being Zoom, of course. And we started with, it was just, kind of a conference call. Nobody was on video. And then we found, it's really got to be video. Anybody speaking has to be, you got to turn on your video. We got to see you, got to connect in that way. So for us, the kind of the anchor for what we're doing is Zoom. And that's, there's a few other things that we've done to try to keep people connected and feeling good about working at DropTank. We sent some care packages out to people with board games and things. A lot of people with kids appreciated that. And I try to, I'm midway through connecting with all of my employees just through very short, like 15-minute one-on-one, again, video chat. But it's a lot of video, and it puts things at risk a little bit when you don't have those little nuances of communication, nonverbal communication that you often have in the office. So we're doing the best to get around it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, this concept of how to stay connected and communicating. I had a conversation with my son this morning because he's starting a new book called Chasing Vermeer in his English Learning Arts. And one of the pieces is how do you communicate, and are words necessary? And what are the nonverbal ways that we might communicate, whether it's through numbers or symbols or cave drawings. So it's, in many ways, we're so mature with our video conferencing, yet you miss a lot of the nonverbal cues that you would normally get if you were in person. What about you, Katie? What are some of the ways that you were staying connected before we were work from home, and how are you doing that now?
Well, I am on the road a lot with my role as CEO, a lot of travel for, different speaking events, customer opportunities. And my team is half remote. Sales team is all remote, and my tech team is all in person. So I really would split my time between being on the road, touching base, and realizing that some folks I was communicating with remotely, typically a lot of telephone and email. And the tech team in the office, we were using Slack. So one of the biggest things that we've done to be different now is everybody's adopted Slack. We've got Slack channels galore, and we found it to be a lot easier than email because the order of communications is preserved. Using it for video conferences as well as video meeting with Zoom meetings too. And the biggest thing I'm noticing different now is that we actually do turn on that video. It used to be, particularly with customers, it seemed like, or partners, everybody was so used to using these wonderful video conference technologies with the camera off, which seems kind of silly now. So I feel like we're getting to know each other better on a different level by using the video. Like Dave, I also do have a weekly all-hands meeting. Typically, it was leaders presenting for their business unit. And those were the people who were being presented on video. Now everybody's on video, and everybody is always on the edge of their seat because they never know who I'm going to call on to give a presentation just to check in. And it could be something like, hey, how was your weekend? We do these on Mondays. Or what are you planning to work on this week? Similarly, we usually would do Friday happy hours in the office, and so now we've moved those to be remote. And it's kind of fun because after seeing everybody in their office, their home office settings, you never know where they're going to be on a Friday at the end of the day. It could be out on a deck or something like that, and so it's a good way for us to stay casual. We also try to do a lot of social things, typically in the office. We do anything from learning how to curl together, going to do a beach fire together. And so since that's all been put on hold, obviously with stay-at-home orders, we're doing other things. Tonight actually is going to be a Seinfeld watching party with the new Seinfeld special on Netflix. So we'll all turn it on at the same time and have running commentary going on Slack. So looking forward to that.
That's a great idea, just to watch something at the same time. That's something that I don't think we've tried yet, but I think that's awesome. Chris, what about you? What are some of the ways that you really have a high level engagement with your team, where they really, I think, my observation, feel a part of something? What are some of the ways that you're engaging, and what's changed based on this stay-at-home zone we're in?
No, sure. I think I would echo some of the same comments that Katie and Dave had mentioned. That, I mean, it was kind of an abrupt change for us, knowing that our workforce before this thing was almost exclusively in offices, right? Our sales teams, our engineering teams, our support, all the support functions were in very close proximity to each other. So it was concerning to think, oh, how are we going to maintain just interpersonal communications, and how are we gonna stay current with everything? And I think we've all been, massively surprised at how functional the Zoom platform has been. I think if you rewind back to pre-Zoom and other platforms we've tried to use, and just thinking about the extent of the video conferencing that we're doing today, on-demand calls, the things that just would have seemed like too onerous before, they've been very seamless. So I think it's helped to really instantiate this platform as actually a viable alternative to in-person. I think nothing beats in-person, but this is pretty close, right? I think even with customer communications, there's a great potential to have a quick Zoom check-in, and it feels a little bit more connected than just a phone call. I think what I've learned personally is that now when I'm on the phone with somebody and I'm not on video, it does seem even more impersonal than it used to, right? It's a contrast. So I think we've been pretty pleased. I also think we've been helped by kind of the shutdown, right? I joke with people that the productivity has been way up, the busyness has been way up, but there's also nothing to do, right? So I live near Santa Monica. The beaches are closed. The beaches were open and everybody was forced to work at home. I don't know if we'd have the same level of availability from the workforce. So I think there's kind of a healthy balance of we're making the best of the situation, with also kind of a yearning for the future that we could actually get back into some offices and get back into some sense of normalcy in communicating together. But so far it's been really impressive at how everyone is engaged. And I just give you a little other nugget. I do an all hands call on Fridays, and it's a pretty big call. I mean, we have probably 300, 400, 500 people join this call. And the fact that everybody can be available on video, like Katie said, where you can call in someone, and when you're seeing somebody talk versus just hearing their voice, it makes a much bigger difference. So we're having a lot of fun with it too. There's a lot of, I'll just tell you a funny anecdote, in trying to, inspire salespeople to drive harder, be more productive. What we've learned with some of these funny virtual backgrounds that we have is I actually did a contest with my team. And I said, okay, look, I grew up in the 80s, and I had probably one of the most horrible mullets that you could imagine in high school. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Probably was, but it wasn't anymore. And instead of doing some contest like, hey, I'll give you a prize or a financial incentive, I said, if you guys can double your pipeline on this particular service in the next, X number of days, then I will reveal the mullet as part of my virtual background. And I got to tell you, it's just a tip. If you're trying to motivate salespeople, it was amazing, right? I've never seen such a boost in productivity. So we've carried that forward now, where we have people volunteer their kind of shameful, embarrassing old pictures, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So it's connecting at a level I don't think we could have connected before.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I was actually just thinking about this whole concept. It's like when I think it's a past statement, but in the past it was like this concept of sharing is like putting yourself in a place where you're like vulnerable. And I don't actually think sharing is making you vulnerable. In fact, I think it's making you more connected and aware of what other people are doing. And this sharing that I think that we've probably all collectively, I know I've shared more on Slack and in, video than ever before with anyone I work with. I mean, I always felt that there was that sort of very clear boundary, and that boundary changes when everyone's on video and everyone's on Slack, where you start to get to know everyone's children or whatever their home situations are. What surprised you the most in terms of working with your teams and engaging with your teams that maybe you didn't anticipate? Is there some, positive or perhaps something that you're struggling with? I mean, Dave, maybe it's the way that you connect with people on video instead of, zooming around, if you will, or instead of in person, you're sort of zooming around. Is there anything that surprised you that you didn't expect?
I think one of the surprising things was how quickly we got into this. It only took a couple of weeks, and we were, working from home, shut down, learning new ways, like you said, meeting people's children through video conferences. And there was I think the thing that surprised me was the sense of camaraderie that started with this. The Slack channels were full. We have a random Slack channel, lots of jokes going on, lots of, kind of team building stuff that I didn't expect to happen. And I think people kind of were assuming we would kind of get out of it equally quickly. Like, hey, this is something we're going to do for 2 to 4 weeks, but hang in there. Let's do the right thing. And I think it's, the challenge with that is not letting it become a doldrum, because there's not as much, people are now kind of into the grind of it, and it's not quite clear. We're in Illinois. It's not quite clear when we're getting out of this thing near Chicago. So I'd say there was a surprise that came along with how quickly people bonded over it, and how tight that was, especially over, like you said, we're not even face to face, but there was actually a pretty heavy amount of bonding that went on. But the challenge with that is sustaining it, or at least, letting people know that the new normal is okay, and it's, and we are going to get out of it eventually or something. But, the psychology behind this has been probably some of the biggest surprise to me.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, some days I try not to think about it, and some days I do. And it's what is that quote new normal? And I think last conversation we had is, how does this unravel, and does it even unravel? What about you, Katie? What are some of the things that maybe have surprised you?
At first it was employees I have with families over in Asia, China specifically. I had not realized the level of fear that they had before the COVID virus hit the United States, based upon what they were hearing from home and from extended family. In our region, I actually moved my company to 100% work from home. We were the first one to do so before our government locally and statewide issued stay and place shelter orders. And the productivity all of a sudden jumped because people just had that calm. That underlying fear was gone. And I hadn't fully appreciated that was being so distracting for my employees. Since we're cloud native, we were able to move to 100% work from home with no impact to customer service, to any of that, but our productivity increased. The other thing that was surprising to me was that my remote sales team, they're smiling a lot more. They feel more engaged because inadvertently, when we had in-office communications, they were feeling left out. Whether it was that things were just being said informally in passing and everyone assumed everybody else knew. And I think I've learned to be much more intentional with communication for those who are not physically in the office. The third thing we learned was on the dev team. My CTO was always one who wanted his entire tech team there in person. Scrum teams must physically stay together. And I have grown up having run remote teams of staff and various, lives I've had before Naveego even. So I always figured that wasn't a requirement. And I always laughed that, the highest tech portion of the team is trying to be the lowest tech in terms of their engagement. Well, they've learned that, yes, indeed, they function very well remotely. And so as we look to go back, he's even said to me, I think that we could do this and make, going into the office optional, or do rotating schedule, because as we look to, come up with different ways to reopen offices and do so safely, we've been having lots of conversations about how we'll do that. And so I'm really glad that on that side, they've learned that they can be open to different working scenarios.
And then what about you, Chris? What's surprised you that maybe you didn't expect about your engagement with your team?
Well, look, I think what I've learned, surprisingly, is I'm not the boss of my house. I can promise you that. And I'm not going to get any sympathy from Dave, because Dave has 5 kids. I have 3 toddlers, right, that are all under the age of 4. So at any minute now, I could be completely overrun and taken over. And it's awesome because it's so cute and it's so great to be around the kids, but it's also somewhat frightening at times to not be in total control of your work environment, which is not something I think I'm used to or anyone else. But on the flip side is I'm meeting from our other teammates and employees, and I'm meeting people's families that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to get to see their kids, see what their home life is like. It's very disarming. It's been comforting, right? It's makes everybody a little bit more relatable, as opposed to kind of this veneer that happens when you're in a formal office setting all the time. And there's a lot of, barriers put up. So I think that's been very refreshing. I probably watched too much Netflix. I don't know, unless you guys have a good show, I would love to get, Katie and Dave, there's a good show that I can binge. I'll take your recommendations. I think I've watched too many of them. However, I would recommend the new Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN, The Last Dance. I'm not current, but it's awesome if you're a sports fan. But I think that's kind of, what I've learned, and I don't think I would have had the opportunity to experience it otherwise. So it's all been good.
Awesome. So maybe just the last question. We're all trying to look at what happens next, and how do we evolve whatever this, new normal looks like. Are there tools, tips, techniques that you think you'll take with you, regardless of whether we find ourselves in a hybrid environment or back to the offices more, or something different that none of us have even imagined? I'll start it with saying that I think I'll probably use video a lot more. When I see people in person, I will be more grateful for that time with that person in person. I'll see it as a privilege versus something that you assume to have. And maybe be a lot more, I think I've gotten a lot better at engaging our teams in Slack and video and the way that you connect ahead of time, and being also, I think, sensitive to people's time and the challenges that they have on their time in a different way. So I'd love to know your feedback. Just what might you take with you as we evolve into whatever our hybrid environment looks like? Any tips or techniques?
Well, I'll start. I think like you said, video is here to stay. We all used to be on a lot of these conference calls that had video capability, and it was, nobody really used it. Now I think it's here to stay. I think as we ease back into the office, and there are clearly some roles that benefit from being together. I think when I talk to my colleagues in other companies and things, I hear how surprised everybody is about how productive their teams are. I think Chris hits the nail on the head when he says, well, it's partly because they have nothing else to do. That is very true. But it shows what can be done through some of these technologies. I would feel a little uncomfortable if I were in the commercial real estate business, as people are thinking through the floor plans and space that they need for the future. One of the things we're thinking about, and I imagine if you haven't heard it from your employees yet, you probably will eventually, is paid time off policies. Nobody's been able to go anywhere or do anything. We have, when we do deployments of our technology into the evenings, we'll let people get, they earn 2 times the number of overnight hours they put in, they earn into their PTO bank. And, I've had some very forward developers say, "Hey, Dave, that's great. I love all these PTO hours I have, but I can't use them." And DropTank has a kind of a use it or lose it policy. You can't carry over PTO at the end of the year. So I think PTO is going to take on a little more meaning when we start to unwind from this as well. So I think the other thing that we have to be careful of as we start coming back into the office eventually, there's a spectrum. There are some folks who are like, "Yep, let me at it. Just, I don't care. I want to come back to the office." And then there are going to be other folks on the other end of the spectrum that want to be good employees. They will, there's social pressures on both directions of this, getting into the stay at home and then getting out. And we're going to have to be real careful that we don't inadvertently put pressure on people, whether it's social or even, mandatory rules from the company policies in coming back in. That's going to be an artful thing I'm thinking about, of how do we get people because we're going to have a hybrid of this and it's probably going to be a while, and it may never get back to where it was, and that may be okay, but managing through that and making sure that people are comfortable and doing what's right for them and their own families and things that's going to be an interesting challenge. So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I think the next kind of long phase of this is.
Thank you. So Katie, what about you? What are some of the things that you're thinking through right now?
I am operating really, hoping for the best, planning for the worst in terms of, is this going to come back? Is it going to go away? And one of my top concerns is putting my team all in the same office at the same time, such that everybody can be taken out all at once. So I'm really looking at how can we do some rotation of staff in the office and work from home days, and being sensitive to the fact that some people are eager to get back in, other people are afraid. So really looking and thinking through that, being a little bit more creative with schedules. The PTO, that's an interesting one that you just raised. I started thinking about that because what if everybody wants to go on vacation all at once? Now that we're crunched into the year, and so I think that use it or lose it policy is going to have to go out the window, at least for this year, for sure, with Naveego as well. And finally, one of the things that I've been really rethinking is our sales strategy. We do a lot of face-to-face interaction, and it's hard because that's probably, in my opinion, the best way to establish new relationships for tech industry sales of the magnitude that we do. Trade shows and in-person meetings and a lot of travel. And so we've had to get creative since we can't do that currently. And I'm wondering going forward, how much are we going to be able to do remotely as opposed to going back to the in-person, which I still think there's nothing like it. But at the same time, hopefully we can be creative and take more advantage of people having to adjust and use remote technologies to make it more acceptable. One of the things that we've done during this stay-at-home time, in addition to happy hours with our team internally, we're doing happy hours with customers and with partners. And that's been a lot of fun. And that's something that I would love to have continue after we're back in the offices, because that's the type of thing that you wouldn't necessarily travel across the country to do, to meet with a customer when it's not an official business meeting. But it was a great way for us to stay connected, learn more about each other's home lives and the like. So I do hope that continues.
That's a great idea. What about you, Chris? What are some of the things that you're thinking about taking with you?
I think what we've learned is that we're all very adaptable, right? I don't think anyone could have foreseen this type of work environment, especially the disruptive change that it brought upon all of us. And I think that, you guys have said it best, is that I don't think returning to exactly the way it was before is even necessary. I just think we're going to learn. We're going to learn that we don't necessarily have to have a particular work environment to be, at peak productivity. So I think there's going to be a blend and there's going to be a spectrum. It's hard to predict when and how, but I do think that we're all going to be craving some sense of normalcy, but I don't think it's going to go back to exactly how it was. So I think what I'm encouraging my team to think of is just to stay in an adaptable mindset and just take it as it comes. And I think a company like Oracle is going to do the right thing by its employees, and we're going to be very thoughtful around how do we open up, when do we open up, and in what policies do we create with what latitude. I think it's all going to be very respectful of the times and the people, and I think we've learned a lot. We've learned that we can do a lot more with video. I think we're going to learn that we should do some things in person too, but it's going to be very balanced going forward, I think.
Thank you. So I would say this, I hope that the next time that we see each other, at least at a minimum, we can do a collective virtual happy hour. So when I say see each other, I'm just saying see each other, and it doesn't matter whether it's in person or on video, but let's do that. And with that, I would say thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
you.
Thank you. Good to see you.